Bardam's Metal was a dungeon in Stormblood that had a unique boss that featured a series of mechanics that needed to be executed correctly by at least one party member. This battle had direct instantaneous feedback on if you passed or failed, and you couldn't damage the boss, so you didn't really have to worry about damage rotations in this instance. We'll talk about this a little bit later in the video. But this Bardam's Metal boss fight is, in my humble opinion, one of the best designed main story questline bosses in all of Final Fantasy XIV. Do I want more difficult content? Yeah, I do. Do I want to spend more time healing than doing damage? Yeah, of course I do. Given the rise of the healer strike hashtag, talk of job complexity, and the ask for difficulty and general content being increased, which, to be super clear, I am fully in support of for myself. I feel like we really, however, need to talk about systems in the game. In my opinion, this is more than essential talk that we need to have. I don't think it's fair to set people up for failure by not providing them the tools in-game to improve, and I believe that this is why we saw the new level 91 dungeon be cleared by Xeno right beside me during the media tour with literally no healers. Because we have set that bar so low for so long, literally a decade at this point, and we simply have had so many people that couldn't tell you even half of what their kit does on their jobs that they supposedly made. And I wanted to say to myself, wait, is that an exaggeration? But I really don't. Genuinely, from what I've experienced in game, I don't think that's an exaggeration for so many players. So if we want to seriously debate and seriously argue ramping up the healing difficulty in this game, amongst other difficulties being increased, of course it's not just healers here, we need to talk about leveling up the player base's skill set through the main content pipeline, which would be the MSQ that everyone needs to get funneled through. This is a perfect pipeline to introduce stuff to people. Take this mitigation sheet for the Epic of Alexander, and I'm bringing this specifically up as it's something that I've cleared over 20 times, and I adore this fight, and it's comfort food for me, and so I'm confident I can talk about it. You can clearly see that there are a ton of cooldowns being used by healers and tanks. I'm going to have another screenshot somewhere during the video showing like what the DPS need to contribute to, which is also super important. Like, looking at this, when is the last time most players even saw a Scholar cast Recitation Excogitation? Or heck, in the first phase, we literally used Dissipate as something other than a 3 energy drain spam DPS cooldown. What? We're actually using Dissipation for a heal and to actually do stuff like that? What? If I'm in an expert dungeon, I'm lucky to even see the Scholar cast Seraph even once, or a Lustrate. And yet, it's in this MIT sheet, this Recitation Excog, consistently over and over again, just for healing the tank in the Epic of Alexander as they get ravaged like it's furry art on Twitter. The reality is, the difference between an Expert Roulette and a Savage Raid or beyond is staggering, and while I get that there is a significant middle ground between them, and I agree, we need that missing middle in terms of content, we have a massive failing in the game right now. The overwhelming majority of players, I bet, couldn't even tell you 80% of what the skills on this mitigation sheet are, or what they do, or why they're being used at the times that they are. And don't tell me that I'm wrong, because I'm so often, I'm shown tanks that just flat out don't mitigate at all, like they're allergic to their own toolkit. They're like, oh, Rampart, oh my god, vengeance, bloodletting. Or heck, not that I want to go back to the MIT sheet again, but look at the DPS and tanks and look at all the times that they should be ideally contributing to mitigate the damage for the party. It's like pulling teeth to get this in general. So back to Bardam's Metal and that awesome dungeon. You'd best believe that I think that we should have a lot more dungeons in the main story questline, which is that main pipeline all players are forced through, that are going to be filled with bosses and encounters similar to this. Obviously not the exact same one. Teach different things, please. Whether we want to admit it or not as a community, we have so many players literally dead starfish their way all the way to level 90. And if allowed to, you darn well bet that they're going to do it to level 100 too. I'll cite a Twitter post here where a player who came to Final Fantasy XIV recently experienced the Hall of the Novice, and that they said that they weren't prepared by it to go into the main game. In fact, I'd argue that it's a problem that the main Hall of the Novice isn't incorporated into the MSQ via things like Bardam's Metal. I think that this should be something that is just seamlessly integrated into the game. I understand why it wasn't, and that there was a lot of constraints in the past, but going forward, this definitely should be something considered as being added into the MSQ. Okay, time to turn up the spice a little bit. Like, why don't we have, especially with the new trust system, a way that new tanks can be forced And yeah, I do say it, forced to learn how to mitigate in Final Fantasy XIV. Like, if someone goes in on Warrior, show them the difference that Vengeance makes to their survival versus Bloodwetting, or the value of Reprisal and Shake It Off to help mitigate the party. Or while I know that it's less desired for sure to have the developers explicitly recommend a rotation for a DPS, World of Warcraft many years ago implemented a system where you'd go through a very basic tutorial, which I do believe should be expanded on if it came to 14, but it would give you in World of Warcraft a basic tutorial on the class and spec that you chose to preview, and I found that myself very useful because I had not really played World of Warcraft before that. What I'm saying here is have the basic fundamentals of a job taught to players. Like, if you play ninja, and note, I picked a harder example here because of the ninjutsu system and all the different mudra combinations, but for the ninja, if you wanted that player to execute every ninjutsu a few times so that they would understand what a katan is versus a doton and an AoE pull and how they would interact differently, or how you'd have that ninja player learn the fundamental fact that they want to stack their mug abilities damage boost on the target with their personal trick attack boost to take down an enemy even faster, and maybe even put it on the timer and show them that in the game, like be like, oh wow, look at how much quicker this was. Like, give them that instantaneous feedback, just like kind of like Pavlovian theory. It just gives them that feedback and like give them like something positive. And I do have to say, make it pass and fail. Instant feedback and make them learn their kit. Or if you're on a warrior and you're in like a warrior learning trial, like what I'm talking about here, say you're chained down and you can't use damage abilities and the enemy is just whipping you like straight out of Balmung's quicksand, and I want that training lesson to combine thrill of battle with bloodwetting with equilibrium, or they see themselves get absolutely obliterated. Now you let me know in the comments section, but is it a fear of failure or a lack of failure leading to a lack of confidence, which is giving you that initial fear of failure? Now, people will ask, don't players experience that level of failure in general? No, they don't. That's the exact problem, is we have players that are never pushed to use their kit, have their corpse dragged through the entire game by others. I'm feeling like I'm of the mind that we need to start introducing damage cutoffs if we want to see people improve. I so often, way too often, am seeing myself outdo DPS as Divine from the Stars Above and crystal balls and magicians, and these DPS are at best doing their 1-2-3 combo, if not literally just one, with like a 2 eventually sprinkled in there. Now if we take a step back, can we blame them? It's worked so far to get them to level 90, the current max level, so who is surprised if you ingrain this in them that they do just that? And to be super duper clear, because I know I'll get a comment, I am not saying to force them to parse or be like even the top 50th percentile. I mean the most basic fundamental damage checks, like just above doing a basic 1-2-3, like actually engaging and participating in the content. Because even recently, to cap 900 tomestones a week, I've gone into many an expert roulette the past few months, and way more often. And I've had runs literally go from 11 minutes, and then others go to 25 or actually past 25 minutes, and I'm still just spamming Art of War the same as always, and that's just DPS variants, and that is freaking fudging crazy, and I said fudging. So when I'm talking about this, I am not talking top 5th percentile stuff. I am talking, is this person a sentient, breathing, living being levels of damage expectation? Now let's talk about the healing. There's an even bigger issue here where the content in general outside of Savage and Ultimates has been dulled so extremely hard that when there is finally a time, just as an example, to use Esuna to cleanse a target, you have them in like a deer in headlights going, whoa! And I'll admit the Esuna button for myself has been relegated even in my own hotbars to Narnia. And that's not even getting into the healing requirements of the content. It's so wildly, overwhelmingly lenient that it is trivial to get through anything below an extreme trial, and even in extreme trials, I'd argue is too easy in general too. The current expansion, the only extreme trials that I felt pressed to heal, like really genuinely truly enjoyed it was Barbaricha. I have a video on this channel from like over a year and a half ago or something on Barbaricha and how I thought it was, and I still say this, was probably the most fun that I've had in Extreme Trials wise this expansion. I love Seed of Sacrifice too. We have some good ones, but this expansion in particular, Barbaricha, really stood out. I was like, oh, give me more of this. It was so good, especially when we didn't have the gear. Oh, amazing. Golbez was also amazing. And then specifically, very specifically, the final phase of Abyssal Fraction was super fun as a healer. For Zodiark and Hydaelyn, like literally Hydaelyn especially, I was solo healing that the first week. Back to healers and tutorials though. Make brutal, gritty, climactic tutorials for healers. Like make a Scholar player see firsthand the difference in barrier size and what they can survive from using basic Succor to, I guess I should say Consultation with Dawntrail, but to regular deployed spread low on a target. Then add in Fey Illumination, see what happens then. You get that heal boost to the initial barrier, and then you also get that 5%, which I guess is but 5% mitigation on top of it, and then add Protraction before you deploy it. See how those effects stack, and then add Dissipation, add another 20% boost to that, and then, for the hell of it, let's see how big of a barrier we can crank out on our own and add in Seraph's barrier and mitigation. Otherwise, the Scholar and their allies, if you don't do all that, will die. Pass fail, which sounds brutal, but is it more brutal to teach them in a tutorial environment what their kit does versus throw them into average content that never, ever, ever teaches them this and then be like, oh yeah, here's the mit sheet for T. Good luck. And obviously for the healers, this would expand into more edge cases, but like give them clear tutelage on the abilities and why they are there and why they are important. Like I always hear people say that Lustrate and Excog are the same button and that Excog should just be obliterated because it's button bloat, and how to say it? It's easy to say that in standard fare content. True, I get it. But once again, I go back to that team mitigation sheet and show you that we toss out extremely frequently Recitation Excog. And given that Recitation is still in the current game at 90 seconds cooldown, although Dawntrail is lowering it to 60, I'm actually really hyped about that. This is really, really, like, important. Yes, I'm going to acknowledge there's a Lustrate on there. We could use an Excog there. I personally prefer to use an Excog if I can get away with it, but the 45-second cooldown kind of makes it a little tight at times, especially with all the mechanics, but I digress. Just give them scenarios to showcase the differences of the abilities and why. Or let's talk about Dissipation, probably the single most crazy ability, like in terms of like how powerful it is, yet how underused it is. Put them in specific tutorial scenarios to show them that it can be popped for more Aether Flow, and that if you cast variabilities that are ticking on cooldown before you use Dissipate, you're only losing the trickle heal. Obviously that can branch into different healing scenarios, different barrier amplification scenarios, as well as just energy drain opener scenarios. But this ability is really, really strong, and it is criminally underrated. Probably, again, just because it isn't shown. Hey, what are you actually losing if you've already used all your fairy abilities, or if you intentionally pop the fairy abilities before going into it? And that's the problem, is we are seeing people get to endgame with no idea what their character even does, and in large part it's because we don't have situations in the main pipeline of the game that push them to learn these things. We don't have a bottom's medal for each of these mechanics, and the boss design being tossed, that entire boss design, I don't think I've ever seen anywhere else in the game. I could be wrong, I could just be remembering poorly, but I don't think I've ever seen it again. And I think it is such a huge, resounding loss for the game that's a little discouraging. I think the closest that we ever got to this was during, and again this is optional content that people didn't need to participate in, but this was Delubrum Reginae, where if you got slapped by mechanics, you'd get a Doom debuff and you'd just get wiped out. No one could save you if you messed up the mechanics, and goodness gracious, I was absolutely in love with that idea at the time, and I still am, and since then we've not really seen that idea come back, and I fully think that we could benefit from more of these ideas being added into the main storyline. This would make it so that players do need to worry about executing gameplay, and that they cannot starfish and have their miserable gameplay dragged along with their corpse by their healer that is on White Mage spamming Medica 2 over and over again. More Medica 2, more Medica 2, as their Lily gauge overcaps on Lilies, and as all of their White Mage cooldowns, all of those Divine Benisons, all of those Benedictions, all of their Asylums are up and ready to be used No, I'm casting Medica too, sir. But they never had to do any different than that, so why would they learn how to use Asylum? Now, do I believe that this is elitist? No. No. Because what I'm suggesting here is giving the game systems, the in-game systems, which will be accessible to anyone who plays, the ability to improve, to help the players become more familiar with their particular jobs that they're playing, and for the main story questline, that main pipeline everyone needs to go through, to introduce mechanics like Barham's Metal did and get people truly immersed in it. Like if a ninja at level 90 and soon to be level 100 cannot execute Doton and Katon in an expert dungeon, that player should be taught in the game and learn before they are allowed to participate in expert roulette. They should not be hitting level 100, level 90, soon to be level 100, without knowing how to do that. I would argue that it is more cruel to put that player, to allow them to roam around the game, totally not even experiencing that job's mechanics, and spamming Fuma Shuriken at everything. Everything looks like a nail if all you have is a hammer, whatever the phrase is. Rather than, like, just teach them how to, like, do Doton, Katon, how to do Raiton. What is a Hyosho Ranryu? This is the polar opposite of elitism, because elitism, I know as well as I'm sure everyone else does, that it has a factor of exclusivity and othering people, and not letting you join the cool kids club. Sorry, we wear pink on Wednesdays and you can't sit at this table. Ugh, imagine making fetch a thing. But in all seriousness, how can you be better if you're an elitist than anyone else if you are actively giving other people the tools to ramp up, to get good, to improve, to get to your level, to be able to participate? That's not how elitism works. It's like Gucci at one time meant, oh wow, this person has money, and it was exclusive, it was elite. And now I see Gucci and my immediate thoughts are, why the fudge did you waste money to make yourself look like a ridiculous target? Because that's what you make yourself. Like, why would you go in public wearing Gucci these days? Like, come on. And wear stuff that is also so miserably uncomfortable, and in my opinion is very uncomfortable as heck, but obviously that's just an opinion, and they're like something and everyone has one. But the thing is, the elitism with Gucci is gone. You just it does not hold the same weight. And I think the crappy thing is, I factually know that I'm gonna get comments saying that I'm an elitist prick for this video and to burn in the fires of Ifrit's beefy cheeks. And if we are gonna have a serious talk about ramping up the difficulty of healing, which I want to have, and content expectations being elevated in the general content outside of Savage and Ultimates, I think that this is more than an essential talk that we need to have. Because I don't think that it's fair to set people up for failure by not providing them the tools in-game, the ability to experience things in-game, and I believe that this is why we saw that new level 191 dungeon be cleared by Xeno with no healers, because we've seen the bar so low for so long, and we simply have so many people that couldn't tell you even half of what their kit does. So how can we, guys, tell me, how can we tell the developers we want to use all of our healing toolkit in the main story dungeons? We can't. We can't, because that is not what we've taught people. And so if we want to very seriously debate ramping up healing, I think that we need to talk about leveling up the skill of the player base through that main content pipeline, because it is the prime opportunity.